The Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast, hosted by Joshua Shaw and Ryan Buckeye.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome inside Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast. Josh Shaw not wearing a hat, showing off that's your job, right? You cut your own hair.
No, I went and got a cut. Texas has been open for a while, so now we why
don't you rub it in the faces of everybody in America right now who are sitting there listening to this podcast, contemplating punching a hole in the wall, Josh? Not everybody's open.
Yeah. I took advantage. I think like the first day that the salons were open, I went and got a haircut because I was over it.
All right, so we need to do a poll because I need to know if men call them salons or not, because you just call it a salon. I feel like women call them salons.
It's confusing to me because where I go, it's called Bird's Barber Shop.
So you do a barber shop.
But they do women's and men's, which confuses me because I think of a barber shop as a men's place where you get your haircut. So like maybe it's all because of gender fluidity right now. Like anything can be called anything. Is that the case?
I mean, so a barber shop is now a salon and a salon's a barber shop?
Yeah, it can be anything. I mean, whatever they want to self-identify as.
I can't believe you just call a barber shop a salon. I mean, Jesus, man, you might have to turn your man card in. They might not service you anymore. They might tell you. They might post your picture on the wall and say, if you see this guy, turn him away, no matter how much money that Jay Shaw Consulting's bringing in. So, Josh, probably a good point. Like Texas opened early, businesses are opening up, states are kind of opening up, and it's interesting because we don't know if there'll be a wave 2 or not, but that'll be interesting to see if that happens. Because I mean, it could happen again. Like, we could shut everything down in 6 months again, which, I mean, wouldn't surprise me at this route. But I think today what we want to do is we want to dive into our industry in terms of, get into the reality of the situation. Who are the winners and losers during the last 4 months? And, there are going to be brands today that we talk about who maybe traditionally would be known as a major winner that might have been a loser over the last 4 months. And I don't, when you talk about this, I'm going to preface this by saying, like, for me, I have a couple brands I want to talk about that I felt didn't do enough. It's no disrespect to the brands. Like, I totally understand why they're waiting or holding back, but I don't think that they won. I don't think that they won in the last couple months, which then, if you ain't first, you're last. So we talk about that on the show today.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there's a ton of different ways to kind of look at this because I don't necessarily think there's these clear-cut winners and losers because I think everybody had exposure in one way or another. Right. And obviously, we're going to look at this from like so many different variables, I guess. Like we could look at it from sales, we could look at it from product launches, we could look at it from whatever. But I think it's just a good conversation overall because regardless if there is a second wave or just something else fundamentally happens similar to this, like hopefully people can take this podcast and go, oh, maybe I should have done a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Oh, I should have, been a little bit more active. And we've talked about this on so many different podcasts where like you need to keep, I guess, like being active because
relevant.
Yeah, because I think that in today's age, regardless of if you're launching big things or doing these like there is a huge like shuffle of papers and you get down to the bottom really quickly, all of a sudden you are almost forgotten. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's an element of like that mind share, just like keeping things going that is important. You don't have to obviously go towards like the most riskiest things ever, but there needs to be at least some activity that keeps you on the front of the pile.
I think a lot of people are going to look at this and be like, you mentioned a couple different things like sales, distribution, but everybody seems to turn to product launches. It's like whoever launched products during this time are a winner. That's not true either. Like you could launch products and fall flat in your face. And what's not sexy for a lot of people out there is distribution gains. A lot of people don't want to talk about like, getting an HEB or maybe a large retail store chain somewhere. That's important because if you're not launching products, but you're acquiring customers during a time in which foot traffic in sports nutrition stores are down, but grocery stores are up. Why not? Right? I mean, so, and I say that like thinking out loud, in terms of like a Redcon one, like they didn't do a lot in terms of product launches in the beginning. And part of me feels like they lost a little bit because they had so much planned. Talking to Aaron, I know talking to Aaron, Q1, Q2, we were supposed to see the MRE Light RTD, which could have been, impactful in the RTD protein market because you've covered Premier Protein like left, right, upside down, right? They're the winners, or they're the category owner. Them and Muscle Milk, Cytosport or Pepsi or whoever owns it now. But Aaron and Redcon was going to come out with a non-dairy alternative to that, and it was good. I tried it in January. They sent them to me in January. They were great. They were going to go to market with them, and I think I would assume they elected to hold it. And I know they were waiting for line time on the product, which that That's the thing about beverage. You could wait for a long time to get line time, but it's still not here. So, but beyond that, like Aaron, I know was looking at getting Emery bars into more grocery chains because that's where foot traffic was up. So, and I can't remember if I think he secured one in Q1 or Q2. I think HEB was like official.
I think they were already in HEB. I think Mayor might have
Yes,
been.
that's what it is. Sorry, Mayor was the one. So like for the outside thinking like, okay, Redcon could have done more. Well, they got a big groceries change, and that's big because that's a guaranteed PO. There's foot traffic going into those stores because they can't go out to eat, so they have to cook at home or they have to Uber Eat. So and they also did something that I thought was unique, and I think you covered this as well as they started doing a Grubhub. Right, like delivery. Now that was obviously local, I think, to the Boca, Florida area. Right, it wasn't like nationwide, but they thought outside the box. So I can't put Redcon in that loser category at all. I thought they did some things that were creative and differently that a lot of people, quite frankly, can't do. Like a lot of these brands that we cover, that we work with, aren't getting in the large retail chains like a grocery store. They're just not doing it because they don't know how, and maybe their pricing model doesn't support it. I mean, they can speak to Joe's supplement shop down the street, but to actually pitch at a Meijer meeting, like those buyers are harsh sometimes. It's hard to impress those people because they're approached every day with stuff. And the cool thing I think about CPG versus the supplement world, and this is why it's impressive to see brands go into Walmarts and things. Even though I don't like the formulas, to get into a Walmart is not easy. It's very difficult because the category buyers at these places, they don't drink the Kool-Aid. Like they're not watching social media and know who I am. They're not, they don't care about that stuff. They want good price point, decent product, and they want to know how many points you're going to give them. Like at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing for them. Is it going to move?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that to your point, like kind of covering a little bit more around like the retail points, they're depending on where your products were at, did create kind of winners and losers if you want to just consider it from like sales, because like you said, like the food channel or grocery stores, you had mass and then you had club, where we're like the three kind of big areas, physical retail areas, that if you had products in those spaces, you were doing pretty well. So it was this idea of like the big get bigger, because most of the brands that are in those spaces are usually the bigger brands overall. So you did see, somebody like a Glambia or even, Muscle Farms or things that have like some products in those spaces, Cellucors, things like that did improve because people were changing the way they were shopping. So they weren't going maybe specialty retail, go to a GNC or a Vitamin Shop.
Right.
If they wanted to kind of secure a more safe shopping environment, they were already going just to like Walmart to pick up some groceries. Why not swing over to the active nutrition section, maybe trade down on your pre-workout that week. But it's okay because you're like, you know what, next month maybe I'll change it back up and go back to my normal buying pattern. But right now I don't want to risk going and doing something different. So a lot of that kind of happened. And then you also had, if people were really well secured in terms of like direct to consumer or Amazon, those brands did extremely well still. But outside of that, if you were really leveraged on, we've talked about this before, like if you were really big on mom and pop supplement shops or just maybe GNC Vitamin Shop, those types of ones, you were struggling because you weren't getting the general traffic. You weren't getting what normal, or if you were in a bunch of gyms, say you were selling beverages and your main channel was at Gold's Gyms, 24 Hours, LA Fitnesses, things like that. You just weren't getting any of that traffic. But just to kind of bounce over to Redcon for a little bit, I mean, I think that something that I noticed, at least from Aaron's perspective, is that he did get out a little bit more in the media, which I think is pretty unique, where he was kind of going beyond the traditional kind of sports nutrition media and going a little bit further than that and trying to tell the story of reopening America and trying to really appeal, I think, to his customer base that he's Redcon is really kind of carving out at this point. So them showing activity, them still having meetings and showing the distribution center and doing all those types of things, that actually did help a little bit for them. Wasn't a traditional kind of win, what you would consider, but like the activity showing them that like going, I think helped just the peek behind the curtains that it was still going, regardless of what the sales level was or not, if it went down a little bit or not. I don't necessarily know that, but I think that they did do some little things that would, show that they were obviously not losing. But to your point, like I think from what they expected in Q1, Q2, it's probably nowhere near what they expected.
And I think he's admittedly already mentioned that publicly on Facebook as well, as like, we didn't do what we had planned. And I don't think anybody did. Nobody did, but like for Aaron being, and you've spent time with him, I spent time with him, being as competitive as he is, I'm sure it just killed him. I'm sure it killed him to not be able to do that. But what I do know, and what once, now moving forward, once he puts his foot back on the gas, it's going to be like all out, in Q3, Q4. So it'll be interesting to see there. You mentioned like there were brands that really supported the brick and mortar model, like wanted to support the mom and pop shop, has an entire outside sales force that would do that. And because of that, they didn't make sales. But what even sucks more is like, more so than like not coming out with products and not making sales, is so many people lost their jobs. And there's a lot of big brands that you and I both know where they downsized a ton. Yeah. I mean, even with the SBA loans, like that wasn't enough to keep people around. Left a lot of people unemployed and laid off. So, I mean, we're not trying to pour salt in the wound at all, because we totally understand it. But I guess that is a direct response to the strategy that you implemented and decided to go with. And if you didn't see direct-to-consumer being where you needed to be, or at least have a strong play in that area a couple of years ago, I personally think it was a huge mistake not to. I mean, you obviously still can support the brick-and-mortar retail. You should still support them, but you can do it differently. Like, there are ways to support that channel versus your channel. If you think one-dimensionally and you're in a vacuum, then you're going to have a hard time, and you're going to struggle doing it. That's why, some of the brands that I'm thinking of right now, like you're right, they're in LA Fitnesses and brick and mortars, and then their sales dropped 40% and then 50%. Well, it's because you didn't build an online business and you didn't care to, because you thought you're going all in on this. And I would love to support, and we can talk about the retail stores, because they deserve like love too. But I mean, they struggled too. But it's just like you got to figure out that happy medium. And I think the brands that can do that, are still around. But then you have brands like Ghost, right, direct to consumer, pretty much, and then GNC, which GNC was still going to submit POs. Ghost has a lifestyle brand. We've all heard that before. But they did stuff. In terms of product launches, I mean, they literally just launched their Nutter Butter collaboration. So an authentic collab with Nutter Butter that I don't know if a lot of brands would have launched it during COVID. They said, they had a plan all along, dating back to last year, that they were going to launch it on National Peanut Butter Cookie Day. And they did, regardless of the external environment. And I believe one thing about Dan Ryan that people are listening to this, like they don't show their cards. They don't brag about making money. They don't brag about growing year over year. They never would have, and I don't think they ever will. But through conversation, you can tell they're doing okay. And, they definitely, I believe, are one of those brands in Q1, Q2 who actually excelled and did very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the activity that they had, at least from outward, what people could see, with the license offerings, I think that is still something you push forward with, because you've worked so hard with those partners. You have launch plans. You have a lot of things to go to market. It might be, a small amount of like pressure that is not going to perform as well as you would hope, just because I think there's just a fraction of people that might not have the discretionary income or whatever. But I still think you can't really put the brakes on something like that. And then the other two products that they launched that were not necessarily like licensed flavors, I know they had one within it, were, for me, I think they were both like extremely on trend. So like Gamer, which if anybody paid attention to like anything around streaming, video game consoles, anything around esports gaming during the time of quarantine, like that was the time to launch anything at that point, because so many people were plugging in and trying things. And then a greens product, which is again on trend in the sense of like, general health and wellness products, really bringing that to light and saying, hey, maybe you need to be adding some of this to your normal kind of thing. So to me, I think those two launches were something that was like socially relevant to the moment. So like they could have had some extra risk in it, but actually got probably de-risked because of what was happening. So you've pushed forward on those ones. And then kind of the other thing that got announced during this time was that the partnership, the joint venture with Anheuser-Busch, AB InBev. So like their venture arm. So like that really shows that they were not only like doing the launches, but also laying the groundwork and still pushing forward on some very massive like plans to transform their business towards being, having a beverage arm. So I think like, to me, they, like from A to Z probably did a lot more than a lot of other people, just because if you look at it and you actually understand what they were doing, a lot of it makes a ton of sense. And the moves were made as, I guess, as best you could in the situation that you kind of had. But, I think that there's another brand, and we're probably going to talk about them as well, but like just to kind of transition into NutraBio.
Yep.
I've had a few conversations with, that team over the time, and even well before this even happened, I spent time in New Jersey like a couple weeks before the whole U.S. kind of shut down. And one of the biggest things that myself and Mark were talking about was around really leveraging his manufacturing for being a competitive advantage. I think that he's always kind of leaned in and said like, this is why we have the highest qualities and those types of things. But it's also a competitive advantage of how quick you can flip on the switch to create things. Like, literally. So all of a sudden, you have this need for immunity type of immune boost products or general health or wellness, different vitamins, things like that in the sport nutrition space were not generally offered all that much. There wasn't a lot of brands that champion. Now, if you think more towards like vitamins and minerals category, right, those brands, they have obviously a ton of them. But like if you want to stay within sports brands and the brands you trust and know, there wasn't a lot of them that were offering products like that. But NutraBio could flip on a switch and then all of a sudden they have a basket of products for you that still is extremely high quality, is everything is taken to the utmost standard level. And I think that was a big kind of thing for them to like put a stake in the ground and say like, we can really utilize this manufacturing like for a huge advantage to take on whatever kind of trends that are happening in the market.
That was, quite frankly, I think one of the most impressive things that somebody did during this time was shut down production of everything that they were doing and amped up production of capsules with vitamin C. And then they came out with first response and immunity, like products that are titled appropriately for the time going on too. To the point where like even that, so it's no surprise, like we use Mark and NutraBio products in Fit Butters, and stock ran low on some of our stuff, because they weren't producing it. So we had to resort to going to like a different size, which was a different cost structure. It was fine because they just weren't producing protein powders because they were putting all the efforts into this initiative that they were doing, which people need to realize too, like they weren't making money on this stuff. Like they were giving away a ton of product. I think the last time I talked to Mark, there was something like 300K, some crazy high number in terms of how much product they had given away, which does not surprise me. But where they're going to recoup that benefit, one would think, would be the goodwill and the amount of people that they pleased over the last 3 months. And the people who look at that brand say, this brand is an honorable brand. Like, they're doing the right thing. I want to support them because they do have good products. So it's not like they didn't launch their ethics line, which we've been waiting for, for like a year now. They went the route that they should have went. And to your point, having your own manufacturing facility allows you to do whatever you damn well want for the most part. They have a labeling application machine. They have like literally everything in that facility. Everything you could want in that facility is right there. A brand that also was able to turn quickly in terms of immunity products as well, which kind of surprised me a bit, was like Gasperi. So Gasperi had their immunity stuff, an elderberry, and I guess they had an immunity product, they had an elderberry product, and then they had a third product that's escaping right now. That was designed to be launched at the end of summer. They were able to work with their contract manufacturer to get that moved up, which doesn't always happen. But you also have to remember that contract manufacturers probably were called by a lot of different supplement brands saying, hey, put that production on hold. We don't need it now. So they're probably looking for things. So that indirectly then helped Gasperi come out pretty quickly with some of the stuff that they were doing. And again, that ability to think and pivot quickly and do that, because Gasperi, no offense to Rich and Alex and the team over there, like I don't think Gasperi. When I think Gasperi, I don't think of a health brand. Or I never have, until recently. Like they have bone broth and stuff now, right? They're trying to change their tune, but I think most consumers probably wouldn't have expected this type of products, like an elderberry gummy. I have them; they're great, they're cool. It's just like that came from a sports nutrition brand because they knew that there was a need for that type of stuff in the market. So I think if you were able to move quickly and do things, or at least keep on with your plan, you end up kind of being in that winner category, at least in my eyes, because at least you didn't just roll over and die. You tried some. There were plenty of brands that just sat and waited and used their SBA loan and tried to pay employees the minimum they could to keep them around. But brands like NutraBio, and then we could talk about Core Nutritionals, Doug Miller, and they had a brand new, basically rebrand, an expensive rebrand. Anybody who's ever worked on a rebrand before knows how expensive that is, how much time goes into it. They launched an entire new white label, all new formulations of their products. They kept with their plan. They probably did. I was talking to a retailer that Josh and I know really well, and he said that they probably did 1/10 of the sales that they normally would do on a launch like this. So that just tells you at a retail level, kind of where Doug and team probably took a hit, but they wanted to stay the course and they wanted to keep going because they wanted to be relevant in consumers' eyes when they came out of this. And they're definitely relevant in my eyes. I mean, they're one of my favorite brands that I use anyway personally, and I think a lot of people out there that at least follow our channel think the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have the buffer or the capitalization to be able to handle some of the risk, you can continue to do things. Obviously, if you're down to your last few nickels, you really don't want to launch something, rebrand or something crazy like that and risk your whole business on it. You want to just try to figure out how to kind of extend the runway a little bit and wait until the economy's open back up, and then you can kind of go full force back into whatever plan's possible. And that's what you're seeing probably with the vast majority of the brands, is that they don't have much from cash on hand or any, I guess, realistic means of raising capital, and they were really just looking for the government to kind of bail them out. And because of that, they just kind of stood around and didn't really know what ultimately to do. I think that we probably didn't see a lot of what a lot of these brands were doing. Hopefully they were doing things inside of their own four walls to secure their house. Maybe work on some new initiatives, work on some back of the house planning and strategies and things like that to make sure whenever they do come back out of this, they're a stronger business. And you made a point around like the channel. A lot of times, there's a few brands that really like champion, like we're only sold direct to consumer or only sold brick and mortar retail. Like we are with you guys and whatever. And I've always just kind of thought how admirable that was, because they're kind of like, why are you riding down a Titanic, like down to the ground? I don't really know why you would do that, but it's one of those things where I think if you did not take it in this stance and go like, wow, I probably should make some changes in my business. I don't know what's going to help you at that point, because I think that this created so much exposure, like for your business. Like you literally could have taken these last 4 months and like totally redirected your business if you wanted to, if you really were serious and you weren't just thinking of this as like some fun little lifestyle business that you make a little money on the side from. Like if this is your life and you have other people that are also employed by you, that this is their lives, things like that, you should have been taking this pretty seriously. So I'm curious to see like what the summer looks like, if people are coming out of this stronger. What I'll say is I haven't really seen all that much lately, so I don't know. That's not to say that people aren't gearing up, but we'll kind of see what things do. I mean, I'd like to see a lot of brands kind of change up and pivot a little bit from what they were doing, especially if they got stuck in the wrong areas. Because I don't think that anything that happened during COVID was fundamentally like not already in the system. It just accelerated a lot of things. So like if you didn't already see it coming, this was blatant as possible. You should see it. You should make the changes now. If you don't make the changes after you just saw it right in front of your face, there's no hope for you at this point.
I think one good practice over this is if you didn't have product launches and you didn't have much, you didn't know what the hell to do, you should have opened your books and look at the middle of the P&L and figured out where the hell you could cut costs and where you could become more lean and efficient as a company. Because I think there's just so much irresponsible spending that goes on in some of these businesses that then they find themselves in a tight spot and they're not sure what to do. So, I mean, that could literally be anything down, from saving like a nickel on packaging or whatever it might be. Like, just go through it. If you have nothing else to do, be productive. Do something.
We've talked a lot around like, we don't really talk a lot about it, but like the SKU rationalization theory. You know what I mean? Like literally looking at your because most of the time companies, especially in our space, a lot of times inventory is what bankrupts these companies. It's not anything else. It's because they have bloated inventory. They have inventories like spread all over the place that things aren't selling. So it's a matter of, because these companies also don't own their own manufacturing a lot of times, there's not much like from a manufacturing efficiency process that you can go through to like try to cut some things. I mean, like you said, there might be some things where you can renegotiate some spends on labels or things like that. Most of that's going to be forward looking, not necessarily like in the moment. But then like from a SKU rationalization point, like you should be looking at that and saying like, there's probably 30 or 40% of my SKUs that I need to just like either liquidate, figure out what I need to do, create cash as fast as possible and then get rid of them because they're not really ever going to sell. They're not worth anything.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing or the hardest part sometimes is people don't. It's kind of like why we hoarder shit in our lives, right? Like we hate saying goodbye to things, and especially like if you spend time, if you're the formulator in that product and you really like it yourself, but it doesn't sell, you have a hard time cutting that. Or maybe you have one key account that really likes it. It's like, well, I can't take it away. Well, you have minimums at your manufacturer that you have to hit. Is he buying the entire minimum from you? Probably not, he or she. So you're right, and that was one thing too, just from big corporate America is like the 80-20 rule is everywhere, right? Like 80% of your sales come from like your top X products, and the rest is what we call the tail. You take a hard look at the tail and you cut the shit out of it if you have to. And that doesn't mean you have to come out with new flavors to replace them either, because that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. Well, if I cut 3 flavors, I have to come out with 3. No, you don't. You don't have to do that. You don't need. That's the thing. Like, I mean, I give Aaron credit because they have like 1 million flavors of Total War now, and it's like I don't know how you do it. I mean, you figure out a way to do it. He does, or they, whatever it might be. But I mean, it's just like I would be overwhelmed just on that one SKU, on that one product, having 20 SKUs because they're all different flavors. It's like, man. I mean, I would say 99% of the companies can't do what he's doing with that many flavor SKUs on it. But like that would just make me anxious as all get up. Like unless you're going to do, maybe you're doing limited runs on certain things. Definitely, that's why I like the rotating flavors or the limited edition flavors that they launch, because it also gives you an opportunity to test it. Like, does people, instead of doing like a huge commitment, okay, people like this. Now I'm going to bring it back as a full-time flavor. And then I'm going to axe a flavor. Or, if it doesn't do well, then you don't have to bring it back. It's pretty simple. But I like that. And I would be curious to know how many brands out there actually did that practice and went through that and said, okay, I have 16 SKUs that just, they don't move. So let's liquidate them, let's short sale them, let's get rid of them, and be done with them. And just rid yourself of that burden, which is your cash flow tied up in a bunch of inventory.
I'm going to assume not many,
no.
Unfortunately.
No.
I mean, I think it's just a lot of times what I've noticed is that brands will, they'll add SKUs and they'll see that their top line sales are growing, and they're thinking, well, we're doing better. But really, their core products, be that flavors or be that different categories of products, are not really growing anymore. They're actually diminishing a little bit. So you're really just bloating your top line because you're just launching more and you're just spreading your cash out more. So I think it's just probably more of like a fundamental understanding of the how business, I guess, works in terms of the finance side of things. But I think that if anybody is listening to this and they're thinking, what the heck is SKU rationalization or any of those types of things, like, use the Google machine and just literally there's some basic things that at least teach you like some basics on it. Now there's way kind of complex ways to look at it, but I think just looking and taking a real look in the mirror and saying, what can I do to get better? And it usually goes around the inventory side, because you don't have a ton of money sitting on your books to just spend on crazy things. Most of your money is sitting in a facility getting dust on it right now. So kind of get rid of that and kind of move forward in a stronger way, because I'm sure Oreo could probably launch 55,000 things, but they stick strong with their their Oreo cookies. They don't launch chocolate chips. They don't launch Nutter Butters. They just stick in their lane and they go with it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, and I kind of revert, like you think of the losers, it's like not to directly call brands out, but there were a lot of losers, I think, in Q1 and Q2, just in terms of the ones that just didn't do anything or just sat back and waited, and they thought it was going to be 2 weeks of this and then ended up being a month, and they didn't prepare themselves for how long it was going to be, because it's literally, as of this recording, it's been, you have all of April, May, June, you have 3.5 months, I think, at this point. It happened beginning of March, something like that, middle of March, somewhere in there, depending on the part of the country. So it's been a while. It's not done. Who knows when it's going to be done? But it'll be interesting, to your point, to see, let's see what this summer brings, because that it was just a crazy time. With the Arnold being canceled, with the Olympia being pushed to December, which that might be a whole podcast for us to talk about and how that's going to be. But overall, I think the brands, again, and this is like a repetitive soundtrack here, but the brands that did something, or at least attempted to do something and tried to, if they're going to take a hit, they're going to take a hit swinging. I think they're going to come out stronger on this as they're, they were supporting brick and mortar. While brick and mortar was either open or not open, they were supporting their direct to consumer model. And we'll see what happens from here. I'm not even sure what to expect.
Yeah, I think so.
So if you guys like what you heard here on this podcast, hit us up on the socials. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. You can listen on iTunes, Spotify, watch via YouTube. We'd love to hear some comments and feedback on this, especially if you're within the industry and kind of your feedback on what you experienced. The thing is, like, a lot of people will they'll dress it up. They won't say it was as bad as it was. Like, just have a real come to Jesus talk with yourselves and just be like, yo, it was terrible. And what am I going to do to be better tomorrow? And then hopefully you're able to implement what you think you need to do, or you bring in your team and you do some type of internal consultation, or you bring in Josh, even though I don't think Josh can. Have you flown yet, like in the last month?
I haven't. It's driving me crazy.
So Josh hasn't flown, so he's probably not coming to you. But if you pay me enough, I'll fly. I don't care. I'll wear a damn N95 mask, even though I ain't got one. But hit that subscribe button, write us a review, help us out with the algorithm. Until next time, we'll chat with you then.